And I'm going to turn everything over now to Rob.
Hi, welcome. I'd just like to say welcome to all of our partners today for Talk They Hear You. We're very appreciative of you taking time of your busy schedules to attend today's session. I also want to remind you to keep both your parent and your practitioner hat on during this session. When you're responding to the polls, you'll be asked to respond as a parent. So keeping your parent hat on, think about how a parent or you as a parent might answer that, but also your practitioner hat. There will be some very specific questions as well that we'll poll you on that we would like you to answer from your practitioner's hat. I also want to let you know that in addition to this presentation, which of course is being pilot tested, and I'd like to thank our pilot testers as well, each of the people that have been working to contribute to this and make it improve upon it and do the testing, we just want to say thanks. But we will also be releasing a facilitator's guide, a pre-recorded training video, and of course, best practices for implementing Parents Night Out in your community. I also want to let you know that as a part of today's presentation, we'll be referring to the latest iteration of Talk They Hear You's mobile app campaign. It's not quite ready for the public yet, but we will be talking about that, and we are intending on having it ready for its public launch this spring. Now, I'd like to just introduce Joby, who's our facilitator for this session today, and thank her greatly for taking time to spend with us and to walk through all of this information. Dr. Joby Lawrence has almost 3 decades of experience working across all levels of the field of education as a parent of 3 grown children as well. From her early career at the local level as a classroom teacher to serving as a Title III director in the state educational agency to her role as a national level as a senior researcher for the Clearinghouse of English Language Acquisition. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in working with students and families. Dr. Lawrence has written and produced professional documents, publications, guidance documents, and toolkits for use in a variety of educational stakeholders to meet the needs of diverse students and their families. She is an advocate for all children, and as a mother of 3 grown adult children, she brings real life experiences to Parents Night Out. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Joby, who will walk us through the next steps.
Thanks so much, Rob. Welcome everyone to Parents Night Out, where we're here today to urge you to talk because they hear you. We wanted just to let everyone know that this presentation will contain 5 short polls that'll ask your opinions about a variety of aspects of this presentation. All of the answers will be presented as totals or percentages, and no one will be able to tell by name who answered that question. So when you answer the questions, you're agreeing to have your answers anonymously included as totals in the percentages. So we are going to dive right in and start with our first poll. So I want you, again, just to be in your sort of with your parents' hat on, be thinking about what made you attend today's session. So as a parent, what might make you want to attend a session like this? Was it because you have concerns about current behavior? You have concerns about future behavior? Maybe you just want to learn more about the topic, or you want to learn conversational skills to use with your own children on a variety of topics. So please take a minute to respond to make sure that your voice is part of the conversation. We've got about 10 more seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. All right, thanks everyone for taking a minute. So as you can see here in the poll, over half of you are here because you want to learn more about the topic. But you can see there are also folks in the room who have concerns about current or future behavior, or just really want to learn some more about having these types of conversations on a variety of topics with their children. So let's dig in here and start taking a dive and a walkthrough into our content. So did you know that nearly 1 in 14 people over the age of 12 in the United States have an alcohol or drug use disorder? Were you aware that alcohol and other drug use during the teen years can interfere with normal brain development and increase the risk of developing a use disorder? And did you know that injury and violence related to drug use is one of the leading causes of death for teenagers? Please note that in all of the Parents Night Out materials, the terms other substance use and other drug use refers to the use of marijuana and other illicit drugs, prescription drug misuse and abuse, as well as cigarette smoking and vaping. Please be sure, again, as you're thinking about the information in this presentation, that you keep these definitions in mind. So one of the most startling statistics is that 47% of children who begin drinking before age 14 develop an alcohol use disorder at some point in their lives. Also noted in the research is that for each additional year earlier than 21 that a child begins to drink, the greater the odds that they will develop an alcohol dependence at some point in their life. On the other hand, only 9% of youth who do not drink alcohol before they are 21 develop an alcohol use disorder in their lifetime. So you can see the stark contrast in when a child starts to drink and experiment with alcohol. So additionally, statistics shows us that 90% of Americans who meet the clinical criteria for addiction started using substances before they were 18 years old. So be aware of some of the factors that increase your child's risk of using alcohol and other drugs. For example, stress. When children worry about things like their grades, their physical appearance, trying to fit in, they may drink or use drugs to try to escape their problems. Peer pressure is another really key reason for why children may start to experiment with alcohol and drugs between the ages of 11 and 18. 11 and 18, this is when youth are most susceptible to be influenced by their peers and social media. Transitions also can create a lot of anxiety for students and children, and life events such as transitioning to high school or college, even something that may seem as insignificant as a breakup, moving, parents' divorce can influence children to turn to alcohol or other drugs to cope. So just keep in mind that while children can be influenced by viewing adult role models and thinking about how they're seeing other people in their lives react to alcohol and drugs, even though these factors may seem like they're out of your control, there are many things you can do to try to help your child. For example, in terms of stress, encourage your child to get involved in really healthy activities such as sports or other extracurricular activities that are healthier ways to cope with problems. In terms of peer pressure, really start thinking about helping your child learn different ways to say no. Remind them that their real friends would never encourage them to use alcohol or drugs and would support them when they're not comfortable doing something and when they do say no. Also thinking about transitions, reassure your child that things are going to be okay, that everything's temporary. So even these transitions in their life, they are temporary and that things will all work out and that you're there for them. And just know that drinking and alcohol use only adds additional problems and it doesn't solve anything. So just helping them really think about different ways to cope and manage those transitions can be very helpful. So when we're thinking about COVID-19 and how things may have changed during COVID-19, there are some startling statistics related to the trends, and this may impact the use of alcohol and other drugs. For example, alcohol sales in stores went up 21% during the first 7 weeks of lockdown, while online sales more than doubled. A California investigation found that delivery services are often delivering alcohol to youth under the age of 21. And US retail marijuana sales rose an estimated 40% in 2020, and near 37 billion is anticipated by 2024. So again, thinking about these statistics makes you realize that there are some really key triggers for potentially seeing an increase in the number of children and youth that are experimenting with alcohol and drugs at this time. And for anyone interested, all of the sources that we're sharing today as far as statistics in this presentation can be shared at the end of the presentation today. So if you're interested in any of these sources, we have all of these available for you. So let's take a look at our next poll question, again, just to capture your voice and your thoughts. So thinking and reflecting, have you noticed any changes in your child's or children's attitude and or behavior regarding underage substance use since the pandemic began? So thinking about before the pandemic to now, are you seeing any changes? Again, we'll give you a little bit of time to reflect and then cast your vote. And then we will share the results. So take a look here. It is spread out across the 4 responses, but almost half of you said you haven't noticed any changes. Some of you said you saw some changes and it seemed that they're more interested, some are less interested, and some of you just aren't sure. Maybe you haven't noticed anything, but you're not quite sure. So thank you for contributing. So regardless of what's going on during the pandemic, we want to start thinking about the idea that it's never too early to talk to your child about alcohol or other drugs. And while it's never too late to have these conversations, talking about these early on will really help you be able to start these talks before they're exposed to alcohol and drugs. And it helps to have frequent little talks instead of that one big talk. And by starting early, it allows you more time to have these little talks instead of waiting until something happens and then you feel the need to have that really big talk and your child starts to tune you out. Be sure when you are having these little talks that you're direct and honest in your conversations. Treating your children like a partner in the conversation, also trying to imagine how they're going to feel on the receiving end as you're having these conversations will help them know that you really are interested in hearing what they have to say and that you value their thoughts, their opinions, and their feelings. And although it may not seem like it, research shows that young people really do listen to what their parents have to say about alcohol and other drug use. Would it surprise you to know that approximately 80% of children believe their parents should have a say in whether they drink alcohol, but talking about it is really difficult? So this statistic really does show your children are listening, but it begs the question, what will you say? So based on this, thinking about, again, the fact that 80% of children think you should be talking, how prepared are you to have this conversation? So again, putting your parent hat on, thinking about how comfortable you feel having conversations about underage drinking and other drug use. Please take just a moment to reflect and then cast your vote. We want to make sure all voices are included in today's conversation. Take about 5 more seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and close down the poll and share the results. So the great news is that between all of the attendees here today, most of you feel somewhat prepared to very prepared, but there are a few of you who are feeling somewhat unprepared or not prepared at all. And regardless of how you feel today, during and after this presentation, you will have a wide variety of resources to help you prepare and practice for these very important and sometimes very difficult conversations. So as we prepare to have these conversations, it really helps us to keep in mind that there are 5 goals for these conversations. And research suggests that one of the most important factors in healthy child development is a strong and open relationship with a parent. And as we mentioned earlier, it's really important that we start talking with our children about alcohol and drug use before they're exposed to these. And so potentially as early as 9 years old. And if we use these 5 conversation goals to help us get started, it lets us remember just to keep it low key. Don't worry, you don't have to get everything across in one talk. And just plan to check in often with quick chats and keep the lines of communication open. So goal number 1, show you disapprove of underage drinking and other drug use. Over 80% of young people ages 10 through 18 say that their parents have an impact on their decision whether or not to drink. So don't assume that they know how you feel about this. Make sure you send clear and strong messages that you disapprove of underage drinking and other drug use. Conversation goal number 2, show you care about your child's health, wellness, and success. Young people are more likely to listen when they know you're on their side. So remind your child that why you don't want them to drink or use why you don't want them to drink and use drugs, because you want them to be happy, healthy, and safe. The conversation will go a lot better if you're open and you show your concern for their well-being. Conversation goal 3 is really about showing you're a good source of information about alcohol and other drugs, which is why some of the resources we're going to share with you throughout this presentation and will be available to you really help you prepare for these conversations and help show that you have a lot of statistics and information and data on your side. We want to make sure that your child can make informed decisions about alcohol and other drug use with reliable information about the risks and the dangers. You don't want him or her to learn about alcohol and drugs from bad sources of information. You want it to come from a trustworthy source. And goal number 4, showing that you're paying attention and trying to keep them from drinking and using drugs will go a long way. Young people are more likely to drink alcohol and use other drugs if they think no one's paying attention and no one's watching. So show that you're aware of what your child's up to, but do it in a subtle way and try not to pry. Of course, children need privacy. And if you're asking about friends and plans, let them know it's because you really care, not because you're judging them or trying to, again, meddle in their lives. You're really trying to be someone who's a partner in making good decisions. And the more you talk, the more likely they are to open up. So goal number 5 is building your children's skills and strategies for avoiding alcohol and other drugs. So even if you don't think your child wants to drink alcohol or try drugs, pressure from their friends can make it hard for them to say no. Having a plan to avoid underage drinking and other drug use can really help children make better choices. So talk with your children about what they would do if faced with a decision about alcohol and other drugs. Give them a chance to practice saying no thanks in a safe environment, keeping it low key. I have a little story I like to share because when I had my first and my oldest was 16, he asked if he could go to a friend's house for a sleepover. And so I took him. He didn't have his own vehicle. I took him and I dropped him off. And when I was driving away, something just didn't feel right. There weren't any cars. It seemed like everything was quiet. I didn't notice anyone come to the door when he went and knocked on the door. So I was driving down the street and got a little ways away and thought, I'm going to trust my gut instinct. I just don't feel right about this. So I called him and I said, hey, something doesn't seem right. And immediately he said, there are no parents home, Mom. So I went back to get him. And that was a really big lesson for me because I realized at that moment, we didn't have a plan. So we didn't have any way for him to be able to get out of that situation and feel comfortable and not feel embarrassed or ashamed in front of his friends. So it allowed me to really think long and hard about how we would plan for the future. And again, to really think about number 5 and building that opportunity for your children to say no and to practice that. So now that we know these 5 goals, how are you going to prepare yourself for these talks? So thinking about, again, getting ready for these difficult conversations, decide where and when you want to talk with your child about alcohol or other drugs, and consider using everyday opportunities, such as in the car when you're driving, maybe just you and them on the way to school or home from practice, during dinner, while you and your child are watching TV. Remember, having lots of these little talks takes the pressure off of needing to say everything in one long discussion. And this makes sure that your child will be less likely to tune you out when you're having these really important conversations. And be sure, again, to review the campaign resources that we're going to share today to help you prepare. So because these conversations should actively engage the child, it's likely that they're going to have a lot of questions for you as you're talking through these issues. And one of these questions might be, why are alcohol and other drugs bad for me? Don't try to scare your child about drinking and other drug use. Rather than scaring them, just let them know that drugs and alcohol are bad for their growing brain. It can make them sick. It can negatively impact their future. Another question might be, I got invited to a party. Can I go? Ask your child if an adult's going to be present at the party. Does he or she think that there will be drinking or drug use at the party? Again, checking in, asking these questions often, help your child know that you're going to be asking these questions. They can anticipate that you're going to be checking in. They might also ask you, what if my friends ask me to drink or use drugs? So again, working with your child to think of ways he or she can handle different situations as a teenager will be really helpful. Starting to practice early on, doing that role modeling where they get a chance to practice saying no, will really help them when they are actually in a situation where one of their peers does try to peer pressure them. into trying alcohol or drugs. What if they ask you about your own use of alcohol or drugs when you were a kid? So be honest. If you drank alcohol or used other substances as a teenager, just be honest with your children. Chances are good that eventually they would find out anyway. And so trust is important. Tell them that while maybe you did experiment, you know now as an adult that it was risky and dangerous. And if you could go back and do it again, you would never, ever try it, knowing what you know now as an adult. So now that you've had the first conversation with your child, well done. Remembering that the children cannot learn all they need to know from a single chat, and it's important to keep talking, especially as your child gets older. Make sure the conversation is age appropriate and that the conversation changes as your child grows and develops. Making sure, again, that you can give them more information the older they are, and especially as they get older, reminding them of your agreements. And so thinking about, again, how would you talk to your 9-year-old versus how you might talk to your 15-year-old versus how are you going to talk to your 20-year-old who's away at college, for example, or living on their own? All of those conversations look and sound and feel a little bit different. But the great news is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of resources and a number of tools that can help you have these very difficult conversations. Talk They Hear You is a national media campaign that provides parents and caregivers with tools and resources to have conversation with their kids very early and often to prevent underage drinking and other drug use. This campaign is run by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, and was launched in 2013. The Talk They Hear You campaign goals are aimed to help parents get informed, be prepared, and ready to take action. So here you can see some of the products that are available and resources that are offered up to help you have these conversations with your children. These products include TV, radio, and print public service announcements. There's a campaign website. There's fact sheets and brochures and infographics, posters, postcards, and a mobile app. These materials show parents having everyday opportunities to talk with their children about alcohol and other drugs, and they also include the tools to help parents and caregivers start this conversation with their own children. So as you can see here, some of the fact sheets are on topics like how to tell if your child is drinking, and the answering tough questions fact sheet is really helpful. There are brochures and infographics with in-depth information on alcohol and other drugs like marijuana and opioids, coming back to the idea that the more information you're armed with when you're having these conversations with your own children, the more you can keep it about the facts, and the more credible you'll be in terms of having your child see you as a really credible and viable source of information. There's also more print, TV, and radio public service announcements that show everyday opportunities to talk with children about alcohol and other drugs, and we're going to see one of those here in just a minute. But just so you know, all campaign materials, including the public service announcements, are housed on the campaign website and the SAMHSA store. They are currently expanding the campaign to include other substances besides alcohol and exploring options to update the website to reflect the change. So this is an example of one of the public service announcement videos. The By Your Side PSA shows the important roles that parents play throughout their child's life, from the first day of school to the last and beyond. So open, honest communication with your child about alcohol and other drugs can have a positive impact on their decision-making. Let's take a look.
I'll be here to hear what's on your mind. Take this time to talk and get it right. You know I'll be there all your life. When you need me, I'll be by your side. By your side. And every day is a different day. Everything is everything. Even when you think things will never ever be the same. Don't be scared of the world. I'll be here to stay. By your side. Even when your heart ain't listening, or your mind takes you a different way, towards a different path. All you gotta do is sit and dance. When you need me, I'll be by your side.
When the adults in a child's life talk early and often about the dangers of underage drinking, the message gets stronger every time.
I'll be by your side.
Talk They hear you.
So based on what you've seen so far, take a minute to answer this next poll. Do you think you'll use the Talk They Hear You website for help with conversations about underage drinking and other drug use with your children? Yes, no, maybe you're not sure yet. Maybe you need to hear a little more. Maybe you need to learn a little more. But take a minute just to think in terms of based on what we've already talked about, how you might be able to use this information. We'll take about 5 more seconds, give everybody a chance to make sure their voice is included. And then we're going to end the poll. And here are the results. So the great news is, based on what we've talked about so far, 87% of folks who are here today say yes, they would definitely be able to use the website to help with conversations about underage drinking. Thanks so much for your feedback. One of the most helpful resources is the mobile app. And the mobile app is, again, a newer iteration of the Talk They Can Hear You mobile app. Goes beyond virtual practice to help equip parents with the skills and tools that they need to confidently have conversations about alcohol and other drug use with their children. This mobile app is available to download free on Android, iOS, and Windows devices. And let's take a look at some of the amazing opportunities and ways that you can use this app. So there are practice scenarios that share conversation starters, goals, and possible reactions, as well as closers for the conversation, and other helpful information like statistics on the prevalence of underage drinking and drug use. Each of the scenarios begins with a public service announcement from the Talk They Hear You campaign, showing parents talking with their children about alcohol and other drugs based on one of the first 5 campaign goals that we discussed. The scenario is then broken down to help you understand and plan for conversations of your own. And you can even earn badges for completing practice scenarios and for having actual conversations. At the end of each scenario, you can record your own practice conversation and take a self-assessment. So you can actually practice and see what it's going to sound like on the other end as you have this conversation with your child. And that gives you a chance to reflect and then think about maybe ways you might do it differently before you actually have the conversation. So again, maybe one of the most helpful features is that you can practice having that conversation around each of those 5 goals. And that recording feature will allow you to play it back and think again about, would you achieve the goal you're hoping for if this was what you were hearing from your child's perspective? So if not, how might you need to say it differently? What approach might you take? How could you maybe sound, maybe you felt like you sounded a little judgmental or condescending. So how could you shift the tone to make it, again, be received by your child in a way that you want to in order to accomplish that goal you have? From the practice screen, you can also add reminders to your digital calendar, which is a great feature to keep you sort of on target for having these smaller, more frequent conversations. So again, consider using that calendar reminder. That would be really helpful, again, to keep it on your radar to make sure that too much time doesn't pass before you have that next conversation. So you also will have access to the Parents Night Out Facilitators Guide for more information on facilitating this discussion yourself with your own participants in your own communities. And thinking about the app, we just want to get some information and some feedback from you on how likely you are to download and use the app based on all of the features and information we just shared. Again, keeping in mind, you've got your parents' hat on, thinking about how likely you would be to use something like this to help you have these conversations. So we'll take about 5 more seconds. Then we're going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So almost half of you are likely to download and use. Some of you admitted you're likely to download and maybe not use. Maybe this is kind of how it goes with the apps that you currently have access to. And then a few of you said you're not sure whether or not you would download and use it. So thank you so much for that feedback. And as we wrap up today, we just wanted to remind you where you can go for more information about the Talk They Hear You campaign. There is a website as well as an email address that you can use to sign up and receive campaign updates. The information for both the website and the newsletter sign up is shared on the slide. Take a minute to jot it down before you go, or feel free to take a photo of the slide with your mobile device to help you find the information when you most need it. So thanks so much for your time and attention and for your active participation in today's session. We wanted to just really quickly open the floor now for questions. So if you have questions, please make sure you're using the Q&A box on your screen to ask. And we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can in the next few minutes, but we will send out a full list of answers after today's session. So if there's a question that doesn't get answered today, just know the information is coming. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the Q&A. So feel free, again, if you have questions, go ahead and add those. So Kathleen asks, how many states are looking into continuing to drive up says how many states are looking to continue drive up and delivered sales of alcohol? Do you know the answer to how many states are looking to continue drive up and delivered sales of alcohol?
So I'll take that one on just for a second here. And so thank you for your question. I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but what I would direct you to is if you go to stopalcoholabuse.gov, we've got information there that might be helpful to you in answering that question. What I can say informally is that many of you subscribe to our Learn the Law policy briefs. And if not, we'll make sure and get you signed up for those as well. But we are seeing an increase. In fact, in many states, we're actually, a lot of the laws that were changed during COVID-19 pandemic are looking at potentially keeping those laws permanent. So there is cause for concern. I think for those of you who are within the community and have the ability to advocate and have conversations within your community, I would urge you to do so. We will make sure and get back with you a more specific answer to this group so that you can carry that forward, and we'll get our scientist on that particular one to get that back to you.
Thanks so much, Rob. So the next question comes from Katie. She said, how much customization can our agency do with the presentation materials? For example, adding our local youth survey data to the PowerPoint. So
I'll pick this one up as well. So, you know, all of these programs, especially a campaign like this, if you're in your local community, I would highly encourage you to use your local data as well. I would leave the national data in. Because one, we want to show the context. So you could be able to show, here's what the national picture looks like. But by the way, here's what it looks like in, let's say, Aberdeen, Washington, or someplace in your local community where you would be able to do a compare and contrast and get people engaged. Because in some cases, as you well know, the local community data is either more or less than that of the national. And it always feels better when you're talking to local folks about their community and they're able to see their data.
Thanks so much. And Leah wants to know, is there a similar conversation starter toolkit for college age students?
We do have some resources that are for our college age. And you can actually find that as well on the stopalcoholabuse.gov site in Communities Talk. We're currently doing a very large round of Communities Talk, which are town hall meetings, but there's also some films and some resources that way that are very focused on the college age students. We tend to, the National Media Campaign tends to focus on under 21, our charters to prevent underage drinking. Now that we know there are a number of college age students who may be 18, 19, or 20 who are still underage. And so we certainly take them into account. But as many of you are aware on that front, there's an awful lot who are over 21 who are still struggling, and that transition age youth is a challenge as well.
Absolutely, thanks so much. So Connie wants to know, as more states are legalizing marijuana, are you creating material specifically for that conversation?
The STOP Act, the Sober Truth on Preventing Underage Drinking, is specific to underage drinking. That being said, the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention and SAMHSA had put some additional resources and money into it to allow us to create some materials specifically around marijuana. So we do have some resources that are helpful, and that's in part why you see us talking about underage drinking and other substances, to include vaping, prescription drug, opioids. There's a number of others, and marijuana very specifically. But as a campaign, we cannot focus solely on marijuana just because of the legislation we operate under. And but please feel free to communicate your need as you're going forward. We're happy to carry that forward, which is in fact what we did to secure the additional money to add the other resources.
Super, thank you. So Manya wants to know, can we use this for a town hall? And if so, how? How can it be used in a town hall format?
Short answer is yes, you can. I think you can use it essentially as is presented. I'll go back to the earlier person's conversation around localizing the data. If I were doing it in a town hall meeting, I would most assuredly want to add some local data into that. To talk about the compare and contrast between national data versus local data, but you most assuredly can. And I because the audience is different, what I would do is present it as this is one of the things we're considering doing in our local community to get closer to parents, to better prepare them. As we say, get informed, be prepared, take action. So you can couch it that way so that people would have an opportunity. Or you can, sort of dissect it a little bit to the audience. You would, needless to say, you would have to tailor it to the audience. Its true intention, though, is to better prepare parents. And that really is the goal of this. But we understand that, especially if you're doing town hall meetings, that sometimes you have to ask similar questions that you would ask of parents. And after all, in most town hall meetings, many of them are parents.
Thank you. So Debbie gave us some really great feedback on today's session. Thanks, Debbie. Can she get a recording of this and run it with her own organization and then answer the questions live among themselves as they're live together? And then could they get the poll so they can run them in conjunction with the video presentation?
So the short answer is yes to all of that. We are intending this particular session is being recorded. Of course, we'll clip out probably the question and answer period or some version of that to make it more appropriate as a training material. In the pilot test, we are right dead smack in the middle of starting the pilot test. Once all of that is concluded, of course, we'll make all of this available to all of our partners. And many of you are already, well, there are several of you who are actually helping us out with the pilot testing. So we'll say thank you for that as well. And I think Josh has, of course, has put up some other resources, and you can always, if you have a question or a secondary thought, you can always send that to us via underagedrinking@samhsa.gov. And any one of the team members that are monitoring that will respond to you and get you information or support materials as they come available. And
Thanks,
Josh,
Rob.
if you'd be so kind as to put the email address up in the chat, that would be great as well.
Great. So Charlotte said, I have the old app on my device. Will the new one update automatically?
The old app will eventually go away. We are shooting it May sometime, hopefully May 9th, the start of Prevention Week. For those of you who are looking forward to participating there, to have the new app launched. We will probably only keep the old app live for just a few weeks, maybe a month or so after that, and then we will actually decommission the old app and just promote the new app. The difference is when you go into the app stores, you'll see Talk They Hear You mobile app, and then you'll see Talk They Hear You campaign. And the campaign will be the newest version of that, and it uses live action video and much of the visuals that you saw in today's presentation. But we are racing to the finish line. We will leave the old one up shortly, but it will not update that one. That one is a sort of frozen in time application.
And then Leah sort of tagged on to the question and said, hopefully the old app will notify users that there's going to be a new one.
we will most certainly, when we launch the new app, put an information item, one, that the old app will be decommissioned at some point, and then two, that there will be a new update to that. So
Excellent, thank you. So Amy wants to know if this presentation should be taught by someone who isn't also a parent.
well, that's a very easy question. Yes.
Mhm.
In fact, I highly encourage parents to participate that. And I know in every community, we have very active parents at PTAs, PTOs, within your schools, within your communities. And the whole design of this entire Parent Night Out presentation was really designed with sort of parents in mind. I think, as you well know, schools and systems, there are a lot of people who would like to do some of this work periodically. So we've tried to target this particular development so that virtually anybody could do it. As Debbie actually modeled for us today, it's nice to have a parent-to-parent component and a parent-to-parent conversation, because as most of you know, for those of you who are parents, there's all those little anecdotes that come out of that conversation that sort of help you identify and sort of sympathize, if you will, in some cases, with the circumstance. So we highly encourage that.
And Sue wants to know if there are any materials included in the campaign for parents who know their kids are already using, or are these materials all geared toward preventing kids from starting to use?
Currently, we are focused on preventing. Now, it's your timing's well directed and asked that we are in the process of creating some materials that will talk about the early intervention. We are just not quite done with that yet. I would just say we're a small campaign and we're getting to things as we go. And so look for future waves of that in particular, including we are considering and looking at adding some screening materials within the mobile app to assist parents as well. When you get to a place where you sort of find perhaps you're thinking your child's in trouble, to help you as a parent discern whether that's in fact true or not.
So Megan said, do we need to have a license or some formal permission to use these materials?
So Talk They Hear You is in fact a trademarked and registered property of Department of Health and Human Services and SAMHSA. That being said, the only reason that we ever trademarked it was sort of to preserve the integrity, sort of a good housekeeping seal kind of thing. You can send your request, and there's literally not been an instance or a time when we've denied anybody a license. So let me start with that. The whole goal here is so that we know who's using it and that we can help people. So that really is the goal. And the way you do that, and Josh, if you'll put it in, I know you've got the underage drinking at samhsa.gov. The way you request that is simply to send us an email. That will come to me. I'll send it off to Josh Ferrari or Jocelyn, and they will usually within a matter of minutes turn that around and assist you.
Excellent, thank you. So Regina wants to know, is the new mobile app the only way for parents to access the conversation starters?
Short answer is no. You can find all of those things on underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. The website actually has all of our materials in it. And one of the things that I sort of failed to mention at the start of this is that we've also had the largest print budget that we've ever had. And so you can order hard copies of all of these through the SAMHSA store. And Josh, perhaps we can put up the SAMHSA store as well, where people could go to get them there. So if we can add the URL for the website, campaign website, which I think you put up earlier, and then the SAMHSA store, that would be excellent. But all of our materials, including several new materials, will be coming out here in just short order.
So are there any other questions? That wraps up what was already in the Q&A, but we'll give it another minute in case something is still out there that you'd like to ask before we wrap up. All right, Suzanne has one more question. She said, can you talk about the difference between the Talk They Hear You and the Communities Talk? Do we need different licenses for the Communities Talk?
So Talk They Hear You is a program of SAMHSA, which we are asking people to license with us. Communities Talk is actually a grant initiative that is really around funding town hall meetings. So Communities Talk, my colleague Marion Pierce is running that particular program. And Communities Talk is really about activating communities and doing gatherings that way. In either case, they provide stipends for people to actually hold and host those. I'm not certain that the window is still open for applying for one of the stipends. It may be closed, but they're right in the process of setting up all the town hall meetings. And so for Communities Talk, there is no license, nothing required. That is simply just an initiative to prevent underage drinking, secondary to Talk They Hear You.
Super, thank you. So there are no additional questions. So I can pass it back over to you, Rob.
Well, with that, Joby, first let me say thank you for taking time with us and presenting for us today. And I would also just like to thank the entire team that has brought Parent Night Out and Talk They Hear You together. But where we all realize the rubber meets the road is with each and every one of you, as a parent, as a coalition leader, as a community member. We want to thank you to be privileged to work with you all these years. Each and every one of you have spent an inordinate amount of time providing us feedback, piloting things, suggesting different scenarios, etc., and have done implementations all over the United States. Talk They Hear You is nearly, well, we're well into 15 billion impressions on the PSAs. The materials have been downloaded and are in all 50 states and more than 300 cities. It's been an incredible adventure, frankly. And I want to just thank each and every one of you as partners for your ongoing support and feedback. And please at no time feel withheld. If there's something that we're not doing quite right, something we may need to improve or that we haven't quite considered, we would love to hear from you. Our goal is to create the best campaign we can and the best resources for you. And we do that because they're for you. This campaign has been built by you and for you. And so I just want to say thank you. And with that, I will close it out. If there's no final questions, we'll leave it there and wish each and every one of you a great day.